If you asked any Arsenal fan who was the team's great leader in the 2000s, the answer would come without hesitation: Patrick Vieira. A midfielder who not only commanded respect on the pitch, but also made his opponents think twice before tackling him. Vieira didn't just play football, he dominated the game. And the story of this monster began long before the titles and rivalries. Vieira was born in Senegal, but moved to France as a child. From an early age, he showed that his physical stature and talent for winning the ball would make him a special player. His professional career began at Cannes, but it was at Milan that he got his first big opportunity. However, things in Italy didn't go as expected. He only played 2 games for the first team, with no space, no confidence. It seemed that a talent of his stature was going to be lost. But then Arsene Wenger came along. Even before taking over at Arsenal, Wenger already knew that Vieira was the perfect player for the team's midfield. And when the Frenchman arrived in London, the Gunners fans had no idea that this 20-year-old was about to become a club legend. His debut was a harbinger of things to come. Within minutes, he was already controlling the midfield with incredible authority. But it wasn't just technique and strength. Vieira had personality. Lots of personality. On the pitch, he didn't shy away from an argument, he didn't shy away from a confrontation. And this soon caught the attention of a certain Roy Keane, from Manchester United. The two faced each other, provoked each other and, later, would star in one of the greatest individual rivalries in English football. And so began Patrick Vieira's journey in the Premier League. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to dominate. And to do so, he was willing to face any opponent, on or off the pitch. With just a few games at Arsenal, Patrick Vieira was already one of the team's most important names. His style of play was a perfect mix of strength, technique and tactical intelligence. And with Arsene Wenger taking over, Arsenal were poised to become a powerhouse once again. But to do so, Vieira would have to face battles on and off the pitch. In his first full season, he formed a formidable midfield partnership with Emmanuel Petit, and together they were instrumental in Arsenal winning the Premier League and FA Cup in 1997-98. But Vieira wasn't just about football. He was about pure intensity. With every game, he made it clear that he was there to command respect, and if anyone doubted that, they could try to tackle him. And that's when the feud with Roy Keane began to heat up. Arsenal and Manchester United dominated the Premier League at the time, and clashes between the two teams were all about war. Vieira and Keane weren't just about football, they were about to fight for control of the midfield, and neither was willing to give an inch. In 1999, in a game against United, Vieira was sent off for a rough tackle and, as he was leaving the field, he spat at an opponent. It was a scandal, headlines in the newspapers, and fans were outraged. But he was not intimidated. If English football wanted a docile player, he was definitely not that guy. In the following years, Vieira established himself as Arsenal's great leader. When Tony Adams retired, he inherited the captain's armband, and that was when his legend began to take shape. A different captain, who didn't need to shout, his presence on the field was enough to inspire the entire team. But all this was just the beginning. Because the greatest moment of Patrick Vieira's career was yet to come. Over time, Patrick Vieira became the heart and soul of Arsenal's midfield. But with great power comes great trouble. And Vieira seemed to attract trouble like a magnet. Not only did he command respect with his physical play and leadership, but he also got involved in legendary disputes. And if there's one name that always comes up when we talk about Vieira, it's Roy Keane. Arsenal and Manchester United were the great rivals of that era, fighting for every inch of the Premier League as if it were a war. And in the middle of this battle were two generals, Vieira for the Gunners and Keane for the Red Devils. The clashes between them were always tense, but one moment in particular went down in history. Highbury, 2005. Before the ball even rolled, in the stadium tunnels, Vieira started taunting Gary Neville, accusing the United fullback of being protected by Keane. The mood heated up, and when Keane saw the scene, he didn't thought twice. "See you out there," shouted the furious Irishman. The referees had to intervene, and the game began with an explosive atmosphere. But that wasn't Vieira's only notable feud. In 2003, in a derby against Manchester United, he got angry with Ruud van Nistelrooy and ended up being sent off. The Dutchman tried to provoke him, but fate didn't forgive him, Van Nistelrooy missed a penalty at the end of the game, and the Argentinian player's Senal celebrated in his face. That match became known as the Battle of Old Trafford, one of the most intense moments in the Premier League. On the pitch, Vieira was relentless. His style of play was a rare blend of class and brutality. He could make a clean tackle and, in the same move, deliver a perfect pass to the attack. It was this balance that made him an irreplaceable part of Arsène Wenger's team. But glory was yet to come. In 2003 to 2004, Vieira led Arsenal to a legendary campaign, where the team finished the season undefeated, something no one else has achieved in the modern era of the Premier League. It was the crowning of a true warrior, the perfect captain for an immortal team. But not all legends last forever. And at the end of the 2004 to 2005 season, Vieira faced a big decision that would change everything. After years of dominating the Premier League midfield, Vieira faced a dilemma. Should he stay at Arsenal and continue his journey as captain, or should he seek a new challenge? And, to the dismay of Gunners fans, the answer came in 2005. After 9 years, 3 Premier League titles and an unbeaten season, Vieira decided to leave Arsenal and accepted an offer from Juventus. For many, it was a shock. How could Arsenal let their captain go? But there were signs that Wenger was already grooming a new generation, with players like Cesc Fabregas taking up more space. In Italy, Vieira continued to be a machine in midfield, but his time at Juve was short-lived. The club was embroiled in the match-fixing scandal known as Calciopoli, and the old lady was relegated to Serie B. Vieira, not wanting to waste time in lower divisions, transferred to Internazionale, where he reunited with Zlatan Ibrahimovic and other stars. Even away from the Premier League, Vieira still carried the spirit of a warrior. And he still had scores to settle with English football. Then, in 2010, he received a call that reignited the flames of the rivalry. Manchester City wanted him to return to England. The idea of seeing an Arsenal idol wearing blue seemed unimaginable to the Gunners, but Vieira saw the offer as a chance to end his career at the highest level. At the Citizens, he was no longer the same physical monster he once was, but his experience was fundamental to the club's evolution. He helped build the winning mentality of a team that, a few years later, would dominate English football. In 2011, Vieira lifted his last trophy as a player, the FA Cup, ending a 35-year drought for Manchester City. And so, after almost 2 decades of titles, controversies and unforgettable battles, Patrick Vieira hung up his boots. But his legacy was far from over. He still had a lot to give to football, only this time, off the pitch. Patrick Vieira retired from the field, but his leadership mentality lived on. He was always more than a player, he was a strategist, a born captain, someone who inspired those around him. So it was only natural that, after retiring, he would follow a path that kept him close to football. And so began his journey as a coach. Manchester City recognized his tactical intelligence and vision of the game, offering him a role in the club's management. Vieira started out as a developmental coach, helping to shape future stars. But it soon became clear that he wanted more. He wanted to be on the sidelines, in charge, making decisions. In 2015, he accepted his first big opportunity as a coach. He took over New York City FC, a team linked to Manchester City in Major League Soccer, MS. It was a different experience, far from European football, but perfect for a rising coach. Vieira brought an attacking, competitive and disciplined style of play, leading NYCFC to the playoffs in his 2 full seasons in charge. It was just the beginning. His work attracted attention in Europe, and in 2018 he received a call from France, his homeland. OGC Nice, from Ligue 1, needed a coach to lead an ambitious project. Vieira accepted the challenge and, in his first season, put the team in the running for European competition. But, as in his playing career, not everything was easy. After a promising start, he was fired in 2020 after a string of poor results. But Patrick Vieira was never one to give up. In 2021, he received an invitation that rekindled his connection with the Premier League. Crystal Palace wanted a new coach to modernize the team and bring a more engaging style of play. For many, it was a risk. Vieira had never coached an English club before. But he accepted the challenge and soon showed his identity, an organized, aggressive and full of personality team, just like he was on the pitch. Vieira quickly earned the respect of the players and fans of Crystal Palace Lace. He led a young team, gave space to talents such as Conor Gallagher and Eberechi Eze, and led the club to a solid Premier League campaign, as well as reaching the FA Cup semi-finals. Once again, Vieira showed that he knew how to transform a group into a competitive team. But in football, patience is short. After a sequence of poor results in 2023, Vieira ended up being fired. It was a hard blow, but not the end. He knew that elite coaches go through ups and downs. What mattered was to continue evolving, just as he did throughout his career. Patrick Vieira was always more than just a player or a coach. He was a symbol, a leader on and off the field. Someone who represented not only the grit and technique of French football, but also the resilience and winning mentality that marked his career. Even after his departure from Crystal Palace, Vieira's name continued to be mentioned whenever vacancies arose at Premier League clubs or even the French national team. After all, a leader like him always has a place in football. But Vieira's impact goes far beyond the pitch. Since his days as a player, he has always been concerned with the new generations, with the development of young talent and with the inclusion of players from different backgrounds in elite football. For this reason, over the years, he has also been involved in social and sports development projects. At Arsenal, for example, Vieira is still seen as a role model for young players in the academy. His leadership inspired generations of midfielders who came after him, and his name still echoes at the Emirates Stadium even after so many years since his departure. In France, he was also an important figure for representation in football. Vieira, who was born in Senegal and moved to France as a child, has always defended the importance of diversity in sport. His success has inspired countless young people of immigrant descent to believe that they could reach the top of world football. But, of course, when we talk about Vieira, we also talk about rivalry. His name still sends shivers down the spines of Manchester United fans, who remember the fierce duels between him and Roy Keane. This rivalry has never been erased, and to this day, whenever the two give interviews, they are asked about those legendary battles. Keane, with his tough manner, always recognizes Vieira's worth, albeit with that characteristic provocation. And Vieira, in turn, never fails to take a dig at his former rival. The rivalry turned into respect, but it never stopped being intense. And that is exactly what makes Patrick Vieira such an iconic figure in football. He was never an ordinary player. He was a warrior, a leader, an icon. Even after hanging up his boots, his legacy lives on, whether in the clubs he played for, in the stories he left behind, or in the impact he still has on world football. When we talk about Vieira, we are talking about a player and coach who always knew how to leave his mark. But beyond the titles, the rivalries, and the impact on the field, there is something that truly defines his greatness: the respect and admiration he earned over the years. At Arsenal, Vieira is still considered one of the greatest captains in the club's history. Fans still remember him as the heart and soul of the Invincibles, the leader who ensured the team never backed down from a challenge. When someone mentions the perfect midfield, many Gunners fans immediately think of Vieira as the ultimate reference. And it's not just at Arsenal that his name is remembered with reverence. In France, he is one of the great idols of the 1998 World Cup winning generation. Players such as Zinedine Zidane, Thierry Henry, and Didier Deschamps have always highlighted Vieira's importance to that team. He was the balance between technique and strength, a midfielder capable of controlling the game and intimidating opponents at the same time. But his influence went beyond his generation. Many players who came after him cite him as an inspiration. Paul Pogba, for example, has always mentioned Vieira as one of his idols and a reference for his style of play. Yaya Toure has also said that he grew up admiring the Frenchman and that he tried to shape his own football based on what he saw Vieira do in the Premier League. And even off the field, Vieira has become an important figure in football. His stance has always been that of someone who seeks to open doors for new talent and give opportunities to players and coaches from different backgrounds. In a sport where there are still so many barriers to diversity, he has become a symbol of change and representation. But, of course, even with all the recognition, Vieira has never stopped being competitive. His serious manner, his direct way of communicating, and his passion for football mean that he will always be remembered as someone who lives the sport intensely. Whether as a player, coach, or director, he has never accepted anything less than excellence. And that his mentality has kept him in the sights of big clubs. To this day, Patrick Vieira's name continues to be linked with major projects in European football. Many believe he still has a role to play in the Premier League, whether as a coach at a top club or even returning to Arsenal in some important role. The fact is that, even years after his retirement, Vieira's legacy lives on as much as ever. His name is etched into the history of football, and his influence will continue to be felt for generations to come. Patrick Vieira's history in football is not just about achievements on the pitch. His impact went beyond, shaping generations, influencing players, and even changing the way we view the midfield position. One of the most striking aspects of Vieira has always been his natural leadership. From his early years at Arsenal, it was clear that he was not just another talented player. He commanded the midfield, dictated the pace of the game and, above all, inspired those around him. It was no coincidence that Arsene Wenger saw him as the perfect successor to Tony Adams in the captain's armband. But that leadership also meant that Vieira was no stranger to a good fight. His rivalries with the likes of Roy Keane, Paul Scholes, and even Ruud van Nistelrooy made the Arsenal-Manchester United derbies some of the most intense games in Premier League history. The duels between Vieira and Keane, in particular, became legendary. These were clashes that went beyond football. They were battles of mentality, pride, and determination. Vieira always had that warrior mentality, but he was also strategic. He wasn't a violent player, but he knew how to intimidate and control a game with just his presence. When he was on the pitch, opponents thought twice before approaching him. And when Vieira got forward with the ball, he was almost impossible to stop. But despite his tough image, those who played alongside him always highlighted his more human side. He was a leader who cared about his teammates, encouraged the youngsters, and understood the importance of building a united team. This trait was even more evident when he began his coaching career. After hanging up his boots, Vieira knew he still had a lot to offer the game. He dedicated himself to learning about tactics, squad management, and sports psychology. His time in charge of Nice and Crystal Palace showed that he has talent as a coach, but also that his mentality is still the same as it was when he was a player, demanding, passionate, and competitive. There are still many questions about Vieira's future. Will he return to the Premier League to manage a big club? Will he have a second spell in France, perhaps even with the national team? Or perhaps a return to Arsenal in an influential role? What we do know is that, whatever path he chooses, Patrick Vieira will always be remembered as one of the greatest midfielders in the history of football. His story lives on in the fields, in the players who were inspired by him, and in every fan who had the privilege of watching him play. If on the field Vieira was one of the greatest midfielders in history, off it, his journey as a coach has been a new challenge full of learning. Like many former top-level players, he knew that the path in the coaching area would be difficult, but also a chance to leave his mark in a different way. After retiring, Vieira took his first steps as a coach at Manchester City's academy, where he worked with young talents and began to develop his playing philosophy. He had always been a player who understood football as a game of strategy, so his transition to the drawing board was almost natural. But unlike many former stars who skip steps, Vieira made a point of learning the craft from scratch. His first big test came in the United States, in charge of New York City FC, where he had the opportunity to lead a professional team and try out his ideas in a different league. And, to the surprise of many, he did well. Under his leadership, NYCFC became one of the most organized teams in MLS, focusing on an attacking and disciplined style of play. Vieira showed that he was not just a former player trying his luck as a coach, but a true strategist. His success in MLS led him back to Europe, where he took over Nice in France. At the French club, he faced a greater challenge, managing a team in one of the most competitive leagues in the world, with a young squad and limited budget. Even so, he managed to make his mark, prioritizing organized and disciplined football, characteristics he already had as a player. But Vieira's true test came when he arrived in the Premier League as coach of Crystal Palace. For many, this was the moment when he could prove his worth as a coach. At the highest level. And despite the difficulties, he showed that he had the ability to compete at the elite level. His Crystal Palace was a combative team that knew how to defend well, but also attack intelligently. However, football is not always fair. Despite showing improvement, Vieira was fired after a poor run of results. But those who know his mentality know that this would not be the end of his career as a coach. On the contrary, it was just another obstacle to be overcome. Now, the big question that remains is, what will be the next chapter in Patrick Vieira's story? Will he return to the Premier League to manage a more important team? Perhaps an opportunity with the French national team? Or perhaps a return to Arsenal, the club where he became a legend? What we do know is that, just as he did as a player, Vieira will not give up until he reaches the top. His journey as a coach is still being written, and with his intelligence, discipline, and passion for football, the future may hold great achievements for him. We have reached the end of our journey through the incredible story of Patrick Vieira. What becomes clear after exploring his career as a player and manager is that he is more than just a name in football history. He is a living legend, someone who influenced generations, not only with his talent on the pitch, but also with his winning mentality, unwavering leadership, and courage in facing challenges. From winning the 1998 World Cup, to winning the Premier League titles with Arsenal, to his journey as a manager at several clubs, Vieira has always remained true to himself, someone who seeks excellence at every step, never settling. He is not only a football icon, but a reference for anyone who wants to achieve their own goals, on and off the pitch. Although the end of his playing career left a void in football, the truth is that his journey lives on in the minds and hearts of all fans, especially Arsenal fans, who still cherish the memories of their captain. And even as a manager, he continues to show that his journey is far from over. What we can say is that Patrick Vieira will always have an important role in football. Whether as a coach or as an icon, he will always be remembered as one of the greatest to ever step foot on the pitch. Thank you for watching this video so far, everyone. It was an honor to tell the story of one of the greatest icons of the Premier League. If you enjoyed our journey through the life of Patrick Vieira, be sure to check out our previous video about Frank Lampard, another great name in football, full of interesting facts and unforgettable moments. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you don't miss any stories like this. Thank you all and see you next time.